Mrs. Happy Catholic here, seeking to bring you authenticity, perspective, and connectedness. Welcome. Hello everyone, I'm Mrs. Happy Catholic. Thanks for tuning into my channel, and I wanted to share with you today a story from a new friend of mine that I got to know because of my YouTube channel, and she had been watching some of the interviews on there and found them really helpful. So she reached out to me and told me her story and is sort of struggling to hold on to her Catholic faith and wanted some help with that. So she's on treadrecovery.com, and so just keep her in your prayers, please. And I thought for anyone else who might benefit from hearing her story, she agreed that I could share it with you all. So I will read it as she wrote it. I'm from Brazil and I live there. I was raised evangelical and my family was stricter than most parents, so I was never a crazy child. I always liked religion and was very studious. At age 18, I found traditional Catholicism, got interested, studied every single theologian I could find, and converted to Catholicism. I had my first contact with traditional Catholicism through a mutual friend, and that was the first time I was exposed to Catholicism. To me, that was everything I knew. I had no experience whatsoever with the new Mass or in a regular normal parish. The first Mass I went to was a TLM celebrated by a priest from a certain traditionalist community. Even though they are in full communion with the church, as they like to say, the priests there exposed us, the entire community, to everything against Vatican II and the quote-unquote new church. There was one priest in particular who was the most controlling and radical among them, and I chose him as spiritual director because I thought he was a saint. This priest would openly talk about in his sermons to the entire church about not watching any kind of TV or listening to music to avoid contamination by modern thinking. He also preached that boyfriends and girlfriends can't drive in the same car if there's not a third person there, because then they would be exposing themselves to the risk of committing a sin. He even said how waking up and not immediately getting out of bed or hitting the snooze button is a sin, even if you have absolutely nothing to do, and etc. I was always expected to consult him before deciding on personal matters. For example, I'm now married, and I met my husband in this traditionalist community. He also attended their masses and conferences. Great, right? We loved each other. We're compatible. He was a med student, and I was graduating from law school, so we didn't expect to have financial troubles. But the priest said that we couldn't date unless we got married within a maximum of 2 years, because if you date for longer than this, you are, quote-unquote, unnecessarily exposing yourself to sin. The problem was that I would only graduate in 3 years, and he would finish med school in 3.5 years, so the priest told us to either break up or get married before finishing school and live with the bare minimum money as possible. Med school takes the whole day, so my husband wouldn't be able to work, and also have babies. They don't allow natural family planning, even in this type of situation. That's not trusting in God. I come from a very wealthy family, so my parents were absolutely livid with this and knew it was absolutely crazy and I could never handle it. Being poor and with a child in a country like Brazil, not a first world country like the US, is a challenge in ways people who don't come from this reality don't understand. But the priest made me feel like I was selfish because if other people can do it, why can't I? He told me Catholicism was about offering your pain to God, and I should do like Saint Therese of Lisieux. I was so devoted to her, and offer it up. Now I can't even think about her without thinking that I'm a huge disappointment to her. My parents were so mad with this plan that I couldn't go through with it. My husband, boyfriend at the time, also didn't want to do things this way, but we didn't want to break up and not talk for almost 2 years. We ended up breaking up, but continued to talk and be affectionate with each other in secret. It was soul-crushing having to say to people that I was single, and he also was. I would constantly worry that girls from our group would try to get with him since he was technically available. I was so depressed and anxious and started to have suicidal ideation because this priest already cut off my, number one, worldly friends, quote-unquote, because if they are not Catholic, then I'm committing a mortal sin by engaging in conversations with them, because sometimes they curse or talk about sex. 2, any kind of fun that I had, because now I can't read books that are not spiritual, or watch TV, or listen to music. 3, he installed a schedule of life with very strict times for everything, hours to wake up, eat, pray, have fun, meditate. My family thought I was completely crazy, so now I don't have a relationship with them either because the priest said they are in the wrong and I shouldn't change to restore peace in my life. 5. Now I have no boyfriend. He was my best friend, and we suffered these burdens together and helped each other, and now I don't even have this anymore. This situation with my boyfriend lasted for 6 months. So many other things happened, but I prayed to God to make me forget. I was suicidal, depressed, anxious. I couldn't live up to the rules my spiritual director imposed on me. I started to cut myself because I felt so out of control. I stopped going to Mass eventually and dropped Catholicism altogether, and it hurt me so much. I never was a wild child. Even when I wasn't Catholic, I was the good girl. My parents would always say how grateful they were for me. I didn't like partying, and I didn't even curse. But I was so awful to them because I liked to watch TV shows, listen to music, and not be submissive to every man in the world. Awful to the trad community, she means. Sometimes the men in our parish would try to boss us girls around and say that we were feminists if we didn't comply. By the way, this type of environment was encouraged by the priests. They would constantly make sexist jokes. Anyway, after this whole experience, I just can't practice Catholicism anymore. I tried going to the new Mass since I get physically sick at the TLM, but here in Brazil, most of our new Masses are plagued by very ignorant of the faith priests who spread literal heresies in their sermons, not made up by the trads, unfortunately, and liberation theology. I found a Maronite right here in my city, and I love it because the people seem nice, and the priest is really intelligent and super nice, and it's absolutely not trad, but I still feel sick. I remember most things I learned at the traditionalist community, and every time I try to practice Catholicism again, I just can't. I've gotten to the point where I don't even think I believe in Jesus anymore. Sometimes it seems like Catholicism is another story they invented to control my life. I've been through so much therapy, and my mental health is so much better, but if the therapist is not religious, then they can't really help me fix that aspect of my life. She added a footnote. I saw in one of Miss Happy Catholic's videos someone commenting that the particular trad organization I was a part of was a good institution and not like her experience in the FSSP, but that's not true. I know every single priest here in Brazil and the director of their seminary in France, and our superior of the country is so much worse than this radical priest my story is about. Our superior is the one who taught my priest to be like this and punishes every priest that doesn't follow the line. There was even infighting at our church when the radical priest in charge was replaced by a new priest who is considered to be liberal because he preached things like, it's okay to listen to music that isn't strictly Catholic, it's okay to go to the beach sometimes, it's okay to watch movies as long as they were moral, etc. When the former priest heard what was being preached, he started fighting with our new priest through the parishioners, talking to the members of his old congregation and saying nasty things about the new priest. The new priest told people similar things about the old priest, and this went on for some time. Eventually, the superior of the district came to our church to ask if we would like to have the priest who had been replaced back in our parish. The people told him no, they didn't want him. He was abusive and had even slapped 2 people in the past that I know of. But after the superior left, he went ahead and sent that abusive priest back to us. That priest even said when he came that he didn't want to be with us, that he hated it there. And then he proceeded to put down the newer priest he thought was liberal until those sermons he disapproved of stopped. The new priest was very sad for a long time, but he followed orders so as not to stir up trouble, and he is still there in ministry to this day. The radical priest went on to preach, and have the other priests preach, about things he read in old books that weren't even part of Catholic teaching, but which they imposed on the congregation as moral standards. He even admitted this, but they went on to promote these ideas and enforce them. There are more stories I could tell, but I will leave it at that for now. People need to know that what happens in these communities is, if you're new to the Mass, they won't say all the radical things at once so you don't get frightened, but after they realize you're really in, they completely change. This happened to me and to all my friends from there. The priest even laughed about this in front of other friends of mine, saying that it was a matter of prudence or else the faithful will run away scared. And that's the end of her letter. Please keep this dear woman in your prayers. She is a very sweet, gentle soul, and she wants the truth and she wants to be good. It's just that now she's had these awful experiences that have made it very difficult for her to return to the practice of her faith. And like she said, she went straight into traditional Catholicism without anything else to go back to, as far as like a regular parish with the Novus Ordo or a more balanced community with balanced priests. Although I do know that in many Latin American countries, they're having trouble with, it's like their orthodoxy is still sort of catching up, and it's almost like a friend of mine from Mexico told me it seems like Mexico at least is about 10 years behind the US. So as far as like the reform of the reforms and the good developments and things that we're seeing grow and grow in the US and the church, they're coming to Mexico, but they're coming a lot slower, and it's hard to wait, so you can see how these people end up going to these communities because, again, the appearances are so attractive and they seem to have everything in order. So they get in and, they kind of love bomb you in. And even this community that she's talking about, we're not naming which one it is because she needs to be anonymous at this time, but it is considered to be in completely good standing with the church, one of the Ecclesia Dei communities. But again, you see how these imbalances can crop up and these behaviors of priests. She told me other stories that I didn't include, but she could go on and on. It's really something. And again, the bishops of these dioceses need to know specifically what's going on under them in these communities, because I have a feeling that if they knew everything like what she told me and how commonly this is happening, they would want to put a stop to it. So with the best of intentions, we still can't spiritually abuse people, physically abuse them, and look at how it destroys people's faith. They're trying to be good. They're going to you for spiritual guidance and community, and they're treated like they can never be good enough, and no matter how much they try, and it causes them to despair. So I would just ask you to please pray for people in situations like this and recovering from situations like this, and that is why we have the apostolate of tradrecovery.com that's offering a worldwide community of people to help those who have had negative experiences in traditionalist circles to fully integrate into their Catholic faith, to sort through all of these things and understand what the church is really asking of them, how God wants to be close to them and love them, and share his grace with them, that they don't need to be afraid, that they can sort out the truth from the lies and the abusive individuals they met from like the whole hierarchy of the church, that's not speaking for the church as a whole, and that there's many wonderful things to still be experienced, but they need a refuge. They need people who are understanding. So I would just ask you to pray for these people. As always, thank you for tuning into my channel. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.